Imagine your consciousness and memories are downloaded into digital clones, and those clones are tasked with saving humanity, fighting aliens, and playing God with a developing alien species. Would you want that? I'm Candice Girardi.
I'm Shane Redardy. Space Cadet second class. You threw me there for a minute.
This is Sci-Fi Book Pod, and today we're chatting about All These Worlds by Dennis E. Taylor. It is the third book in the Bobiverse series. It was supposed to be the final book in the trilogy, and it kind of feels like the end of a series of books, but it's not because there's two more after this one. What's happened in the story is we go to 10 generations of Bob by the end of the book. So we've got 10 iterations of the original clone of Robert Johansson. Humanity is being moved off of Earth and onto different planets, all facilitated by Bob. There are three distinct different species that we've come into contact with at this point. Bob is interfering with these species in ways that may or may not be good. We can talk about that. And Bob confronts the meaning of his consciousness, identity, immortality, and what it means to be human while not being human. Did I get it all?
I think so.
Grab your copy of All These Worlds by Dennis E. Taylor on bookshop.org. Using our affiliate link in the show notes, you'll support indie bookstores and help keep us geeking out over sci-fi books. Shane?
Let's start from the beginning of the book, of the third book.
Okay.
As we get into the third book, I think the main focus of this book is basically dealing with immortality. Everybody that Bob knows in the first and second book, they are starting to die off.
The humans.
The humans.
The humans and the aliens.
They're dealing that with emotional, and also the first generation of the Bobs. I think at this point we're at 200, maybe 300 Bobs in now. And then there's the others is this Borg-like, not Borg-like, but kind of a like.
I think they're Borg-like.
Okay, it's simulation, basically strip planets and everything else. Kind of a bug-like.
They're not assimilating, they're destroying everything in their wake.
Yeah, they're food. They even said that they see planets and people as food. So it's kind of like ants. But I don't want to get into the others because I think the nine, you had the Dominion, and then you had the other stories. And I like the other stories more than I like the Dominion story because the Dominion story is kind of like the pew-pew thing. I like the more how Bob is dealing with his own humanity, and he touches on some racism that's going to be going on, which is coming up. In the beginning of the book, it starts off with basic Bridget, Howie's girlfriend that's on one of the planets, that she is now in her 50s, and he makes, and then they create androids for themselves, like a data thing, but android. So what got me was that Bob sees himself as this 31-year-old man. So their androids in the VRs always image themselves as this 31-year-old man. So as Bridget gets older and these androids develop, and he goes down to the planet where she's at, and they, he can eat dinner now, they can have fun and this and the other thing. They're in a cafe or a restaurant, and there's some young kids who go, make sure you hold mommy's hand. And Bob realized that, holy cow, Bridget's like 57. She has gray hair, and I look like 31. I look like a kid. So there's this immortality coming up that the author is preparing yourself for, as well as basically the deltoids, where the original Bob is interfering with the Stone Age people. And Archimedes, his protege, his friend, almost brother, at this point is in his 70s. The beginning of the book really has where the Bobs are watching their friends they developed in 1 and 2 come to basically their geriatric ages now. And they're dying.
I have a quote that I pulled from the book that addresses that feeling that this is a Will Riker. So Will Riker is one of the original clones of the first Bob. So Robert Johansson was the human, and the first Bob was Bob. And that Bob did not stick around to help humanity. He went out on adventures, and he Bob is the one that's working with Archimedes and the Deltans on Delta Eridani. But Will Riker chose to go to Earth and help save humanity. Along the way, he was introduced to the descendants of his sister, and those descendants in this story start to die off. So here's the quote, and this quote is about his parents and not his sister's descendants. So their lives were now less than a footnote in history, as gone, as utterly forgotten as any random individual from the Middle Ages. No longer even a ripple in time, except to the extent that I could keep their memories alive. I sighed to myself. It seemed sometimes that life was nothing more than the accumulation of emotional baggage, memories, regrets, and lost opportunities.
Sounds like a Hemingway book.
So Will is coming to the realization that even though he's going to be 31 forever, the Bobs have this ability because they're computer programs. We talk about them as if they were individuals. They live in virtual reality. So even though when you're talking to one on a computer screen, it looks like a human, it's a computer program. And so they can, like, just like when you're playing a video game, you can increase your frame rate and you can play it so that the game runs more smoothly. The Bobs can do that. They can adjust their frame rate so that they can interact as if they were on a human level, or they can adjust their frame rate so they can do huge calculations really quickly in their head as if no time at all to a human has passed. So they're at this point we're at 10 generations, which in human worlds, human lifetime would be 250 generations or 250 years. But to the Bobs, it hasn't been that much time at all. 50 years maybe passes
Well,
by in this book.
remember there was that one movie that we saw with Matthew McConaughey where basically the Interstellar,
Uh-huh.
where basically and there's some Star Trek, I think there's a Voyager one where they go to the planet and the planet's frame rate is either it's really low or really high, and every like an hour goes by and years are like for the person for the spaceship outside that gravity well,
But like
time
that
goes.
episode where Jean-Luc Picard goes to another, experiences an entire lifetime within a few
Yes.
minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So there you get a lot of that through the book. And sometimes it's hard to follow sometimes because they're talking months, years, and I'm sure that it was difficult to write. I mean, that probably had to be mapped out where basically is that because there's part of the book where he says like 2 years, it takes 2 years or 2 years gone by we built this, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, is that 2 years over there too, or is that different kind of thing? So it's a little confusing in that direction.
Yeah, well, he does a good job at the beginning of each chapter telling us which Bob we're listening, we're going to talk, which Bob's viewpoint we're going to be reading about, and then what year it is. And he does
Yeah.
jump back and forth between years. It's not a chronological book. I listened to the books. You read the ebook. It's a little hard to follow when you're listening if you're not paying attention at the very beginning
Right.
to what year it is. He's immortal. He's Some of the Bobs start to call the humans ephemerals, which some Bobs find offensive. We shouldn't call,
Yes.
ephemerals mean,
They don't like that word, but they can't figure out another word for it.
yeah,
So even the Bobs that didn't like that word ended up using that word,
yeah,
because that explains that what they are is that they're not going to last very long.
well, yeah, like replicant. The Bobs don't like being called replicants, but that's what they are. They're replicants of the first Bob, which is a replicant of the original Robert Johansson human. So I want to talk about the Prime Directive because
Okay,
even though Bob is a huge Star Trek fan,
hold on. Spoiler alert. This actually comes in full play in the fourth and fifth book, but mostly in the fourth book.
oh, it's been years since
Okay.
I've listened to Heaven's River, and I haven't listened to the final book yet. So
But go
I
ahead.
don't remember. But the Prime Directive in Star Trek is that you don't interfere with civilizations that have less technology than you do. So
Right.
if that civilization doesn't have space flight and the ability to replicate humanity, then you don't mess with them. Well, Bob, the original Bob one, says,
Right.
screw that. I don't like that idea at all. I'm gonna, in the first and second books, he becomes a sky god to these Deltans on Delta Eridani. And he just starts really interfering. And eventually in book two, he gets kicked out of the village, but he comes back in in an
Android
android, in a deltoid android, and
with them.
lives with them for another 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just does humanity have the right to interfere with other species?
Yeah. He really goes full throttle in that. And there's always a sense of like um spoiler alert. Okay. In Archimedes' death, he even puts a not a droid, but what do you call those things? The little flyy things, the flyy things that fly.
The probe.
Probes. Sorry. Those probes he actually puts into his burial. He does it for the reason that he wants to protect Archimedes because he doesn't want anybody messing around with the grave. All right. But at the same time, you're kind of thinking, I'm going, holy crap, if we going 5,000 years back, oh hell, 8,000 years back in a Stone Age grave, all right, and we found this like modern thing. I mean, what would that would throw us for a loop? Bob
It
doesn't
would turn archaeology on its head.
exactly. So Bob's fingerprints are all over this thing. And you kind of think to yourself, I don't know. I mean, as the sci-fi, I don't know if maybe we'll get a chance to ask him. The author is it the intention of skating on the Prime Directive like this? Was that the intention of basically let's dabble in this kind of thing? Uh, but in the end, because all these people are starting to die now, that even Bob one is like, I've had enough. And he just wants to go. He just wants to fly among the stars now. Basically, he's in grief. He's in grief of the whole thing.
Well,
And
he lost his friend to 50 years.
yeah, yeah. So it hit him hard. Will does the same thing. Will has the family. All right. Will says the same thing. It's just like, I can't be involved with our family anymore because it's just too hurtful for him. And then you have Howard, which is basically Howard is involved in a romantic relationship with Bridget, and he, spoiler alert.
This whole thing is a spoiler alert.
Yeah. The Bobs are offering humans to become Bobs. In other words, to not to become copies of Bob, but to become computer programs, or I don't think that's the right word for it. Homo Siberia now.
Yeah, this whole Howard and Bridget thing and the choice that that Howard puts Bridget into this really awkward position. That was something I wanted to talk about too.
Oh, okay, yeah,
So, you know, Bob chose to freeze his body and to be brought back to life later. He made that choice, and he made that choice in modern day time, like the 2030s. This is 125 years in the future. And
right,
the world is, there's 15 million humans left on the world. They're trying to get them off the planet. There's only two humans that chose to replicate. Well, three actually, if you count the Brazilian, which we don't know whether or not the Brazilian is still alive.
right,
But so so what all these if you haven't listened to the first two episodes or read the books, what happened was the world was at war, and every single major country. So we're talking Brazil, the Asian Union, the Faith Enclave, which is the iteration of the United States after the far right takes over, and Australia.
Australia.
And Australia. So those are the major countries that have the economic and scientific power to do this. They all send von Neumann probes with replicants out into the universe to colonize planets so that they can save their citizens, right?
Right.
So the Asian probe, this is spoiler alert, the Asian probe is destroyed. The replicant inside of the Brazilian probe was a general, a military general, and he's just bent on destruction. The only thing he can focus on is destroying all the other replicants.
Right.
The Asian probe, we already talked about that. The Australian probe, their replicant was a sailor who had sailed, on the oceans by himself, and they thought that a sailor who could sail on the oceans by himself would be fine as a replicant, but so much time passed that he actually went a little insane. And one of the Bobs found him and saved him from insanity by building him a VR, because this sailor didn't know how to build a VR for himself. So at this point, the only two versions of replicants in the VR are the Australian, and there's only one of him because he does not want to clone himself,
Yeah.
and 200 or so Bobs, worth 10 generations of Bobs, right?
Right.
And so 130 years after Robert Johansson said, yeah, I want to freeze myself and come back later, no one else is choosing to add themselves to the virtual, to replicate themselves. And Howard, who is a second or third generation replicant, is
Second, I think.
He's fallen in love with Bridget, and Bridget is a biologist, and he is doing everything he can to convince her to join him in the VR.
Yeah.
To after she dies, to get replicated, because they have figured out that nobody else wanted to do it. They've offered this to other people, but nobody else wants to do it.
And one of the reasons why humans don't really want to do it, because they're kind of looking at the Bobs and all they're doing is work.
Yeah,
All they're doing is
basically
working.
slaves to humanity.
Yeah, and that's it. They made a couple of humans made that assumption, is that, look, why would I want to do that since you guys look like all you're doing is slaving around for eternity?
Which isn't true, because many of the Bobs have chosen to leave.
Yeah. So Howard's trying to convince Bridget, and Bridget has some kids, and one of them is named Rosie, and she will have nothing about this whatsoever. But that's a side story by itself. Bridget is not, if you think that basically Howard is kind of manipulating, he is, but Bridget knows. And so it's not like Bridget doesn't know that Howard is trying to manipulate her. I mean, it's just like she has, her eyes are open.
I don't know if it's manipulation. It's it's heavily convincing. I mean, it's like if you're a married couple and you want to go on vacation to Hawaii and your husband doesn't want to go to Hawaii because he doesn't want to take a 10-hour plane ride.
Yeah, you're sending them brochures or something.
There would be some coercion involved in trying to get your husband on a plane to Hawaii.
Yes.
Which I would never try, because I know that you would never do that flight.
That's a long flight. But anyway, that gets actually into my other gnosis, where she does die abruptly. She doesn't tell Howard that she made in her will that she does want to be a replicant. Her kids are freaked out about it. Rosie, the main character, who doesn't like any of the Bobs whatsoever, goes to trial. Okay, so they have courts and everything else, and that's the thing about this, is that this so much reminds me, if you're a Star Trek Next Generation fan, this reminds me of that episode where the mad scientists of the Starfleet wanted to take data and do science work, and saying that basically we have the right to do this because he's not a human. So Picard goes, puts his record on the line, his career on the line, and says, no, he's definitely a member of my crew. He is basically an entity by himself, this and the other thing. So that's where this court thing kind of goes into. And it's like, okay, we're doing this again. We're doing this basically. Does this minority have rights and this one doesn't, right? So she's dead. So does she have the right kind of thing, or who has rights? And it's the classic court scenario.
Well,
And what
but her wishes were laid out very clearly in her
yeah,
will.
yeah. So, and her wishes, her rights were basically no, told the kids, no, sorry, but it's her wishes, it's her rights. She decides, right? Not us. So it really goes to the individual again. So that's what I think about how the Bob the universe thing is, that we're dealing with kind of like a collective, and also we're dealing with individuals and how these two things work together and how they clash together. Which brings us to basically on as they're dropping off people on planets and fixing them up. In another part of the book, the human of dictatorial powers, the human of basically where they want to control everything again, rises his up ugly head with Marcus, which is another Bob, that basically the government wants to control everything. And Bob create this other Bob Marcus creates a revolution to take away, because these, again, we're at the same level. And I think this was where this whole Bob thing and how other Bob sees this is that, look, we're in a cycle here. It doesn't matter what we do or what we try to do, that sooner or later that we're going to get to this point of humans wanting to control other humans again.
Well, they've already done it. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah,
It was happening on the 15 million humans left on the planet, and they're still fighting with each other. I mean,
exactly.
the
So
Dennis C. Taylor. Dennis C. Taylor is Canadian, so you would think that he wouldn't think this way because Canadians tend to be nice.
I don't know about that.
But I mean, Dennis C. Taylor's image of what a human is not very pretty, but he's accurate. I mean, there are
Yeah,
humans that just
yeah,
want to be cruel. There are
yeah,
humans that want to hate.
yeah.
And, as long as people put hate first,
The thing is, humans want to control other humans, and I think where the book at the end part really kind of messes or he plays around with is, well, why do you want to control the world? Why do you want to control the world if you're going to die?
we can keep talking forever, but we actually need to wrap up. I wanted to talk about Ray Porter, the narrator of the
Oh,
audiobooks. We don't have time now.
oh yeah, we can make that.
So, Ray Porter is a very well respected narrator in the audiobook world. He's an Audible bestseller. I mean, people download Ray Porter books for his narration, not necessarily the writer, right?
Right.
I mean, you and I sometimes will go and find other books read by the narrator
Well, that's how I think I found Bob
because of Ray Porter.
of the narrator. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I've had him in other different things, and it's yeah, I'm pretty sure because I've found books like that.
There'll be a bonus episode in for subscribers where I share part of my interview with Paul Heitch, who is the narrator of the Omega Force series by Joshua Dalzell. So I have another podcast. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Candace Rodardi. I'm the host of Gratitude Geek podcast. I've been doing that for 11 years, and I interview thought leaders about building genuine, lasting connection with clients, colleagues, and community. So Paul Heitch was on the show. He actually, that episode hasn't released yet. But we talked about he's a narrator, and we talked about the Bobiverse very briefly and Ray Porter. And Paul Heitch really respects Ray Porter. One of the things that I said was that Ray Porter does a really bad Brazilian accent. His Brazilian accent sounds Russian.
That's
Uh,
true.
Paul Heitch laughed and said, "Well, that's a narration choice. That's a choice." But I love that. I love that thought process because it doesn't matter that he's Brazilian. It matters that he's evil, right?
Right,
And stereotypically, even though there are some very nice Russian people in the world, Russians are always the villain.
right. So you probably made the connection of basically evil.
Yeah, and so in the Asian enclave, the Asian colonel that real Will works with back on Earth when they're trying to evacuate all the humans off of the planet, he's from the Asian enclave, but he has a British accent. You know? And
Right, right.
yeah,
Because we feel that the English accent or whatever is more friendlier,
yeah.
has
So
the persona of English.
so these are narration choices, but Ray Porter does an excellent job of narration, and he even changes the voices of the different Bobs. So you there's little tiny
Right,
inflection differences in like Homer has a distinct sound. Homer always sounds like Homer, which is
right.
Homer Simpson. You know, he has a Homer Simpson kind of sound. But each Bob has a different, just a tiny bit of a different inflection.
Different
So
variation.
so when you're listening to the audiobook, it's like listening to a movie. I mean, it's really not a great narrator makes all the difference in the world. Like I know you love Les Mis, but the version of
Oh,
Les Mis that you have has an awful narrator, and I can't listen to it. So I'm hoping that they come
well, it
up.
kind of sounds like you're listening to an Oxford,
Yeah, yeah,
a dusty Oxford
yeah.
lecturer.
So I give 5 stars to the narration for, even though the Brazilian accent is way off, I give 5 stars to the narration. And I know that you prefer to read the books, but I have to be doing 3 things at once, so I can't sit down and read a book anymore. I have to listen.
Well, I listen to the audios, and I need a physical book to go back and kind of figure out where things are.
Yeah, I understand that.
So yeah, so I'm more of a physical. I needed like for me to work sometimes I need to have everything out on a table
Yeah,
so I can
yeah.
see everything. I can't have things in folders.
All
Drives me
right.
nuts.
So we do really need to wrap up. This has been episode 3. We have discussed in all the first 3 episodes we've discussed the first trilogy of the Bobiverse series. Do you want to do Heaven's River for the 4th episode?
No, I need to change up. I need to change up.
Okay.
So if you can get a guess, that'd be great.
Okay. So we don't know what the next book in the series will be, but I do have several people lined up, and if you go to our bookshop.org store, you can see which books I have teed up. We just don't know which of those books is the next book. So go ahead and check out that link in the show notes. And remember, when you purchase through our affiliate link, it may help finance this show. And we appreciate you for that. I'm Candice Rodarty,
And Space Cadet Shane.
and this has been Sci-Fi Book Pod.